Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be working on creating an outdoor environment such as this. It's very beautiful. Got a terrific character that we're playing as. Mountains off in the distance. Foliage. Beautiful sunset. It's performing reasonably well, despite the fact that my screen recorder is also running at the same time. And this could be the basis for, something like a fantasy role-playing game or anything like that. So I'm not saying that this is a piece of cake to make, but it is somewhat easier than you might think. And we're going to take it step by step. So just all you need to do is follow along. So let's get to it. Okay, so as you can see here, I started off using the third-person template, and I didn't change very much. However, I did change out the character, and I did this before starting this video. And I got this character from the marketplace. I think her name is Assassin Girl, and this one does not come with animations, so I had to retarget, and I used another character that I own that has fantastic animations. I love this idol. It looks so cool. This came from a character that I own called Ghost Lady Necromancer. And I did another couple of things inside this character's blueprint so that it defaults to walking, and if I hold shift, then the character will run. Apart from that, spacebar to jump and WASD just for the usual stuff. You might notice a little glow behind her hair because the environment that I'm putting her into she needed to be lit better when I experimented with that level earlier. So I just put some lights into her blueprint, and we'll talk about lighting a character later. I didn't even do this carefully. This is just some lights that I put in there to allow her not to be too dark within that scene that we created. So anyhow, that's all. And we can talk about retargeting animations. Well, I believe we already have talked about retargeting animations and making K-rigs. So anyway, that's what I did, and we'll be playing as this character. So what I think we ought to do, therefore, is to start from scratch. Once you have a character that you like, what you can do is you can make a new level. So that's what I'll do. I'll go to the File menu, choose New Level, and for today's purposes, we are going to use an empty level. Okay, not any of these other three, just simply an empty level. Okay, click on that and hit Create. And then immediately we want to save this. Okay, and I'll point out that in Content, Third Person, there's a folder called Maps, and all of the maps or levels that you've made in your game, I think they should be in one place. And this Maps folder already exists in the default template, so I suggest that you use this. As a matter of fact, this map is the one that I use to demonstrate what we're going to roughly end up with by the time we finish this tutorial. But the third person map is what we were just in, and this is a new map that we haven't saved yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose Save Current Level As, and I'm going to call it something like Outdoor _ 02. Oops, that was wrong. 02 _ 02. And it's going to be, if you're not already in that folder, let's suppose you're somewhere else, just navigate to third person, twirl that down if you need to, and save it into the Maps folder. Don't worry about this folder. You're not going to see it, but you'll find out where it comes from a little bit later. Okay, just in this folder, this directory, we're going to save outdoor _ 02. Save. Okay. So now it's saved, and we're going to do a couple of other things before we get started. One thing I want to do is go to my project settings, and make some adjustments here where it says Maps and Modes. I'll click that, and by default, when you start up this project, if you're following along and you're making your own, it'll default to the third-person map, which is just that default map with the playground. But what if you want to save your work and then come back on another day and continue working on the level? Well, you might want the editor to start up with the level that you're working on. So I'm going to set that here, outdoor 2, and here, outdoor 2, okay? And the selected game mode right now, the default game mode is BP third-person game mode. And the selected game mode, we want to make sure that it is the same, okay? Because the character that I retargeted is still just the BP underscore third-person character. So if we do that, let's just save all right now. That means that the next time we open this project, it's not going to open up to the playground level, but it will open up to this level that we're creating right now. So the first thing I like to do is to create a sky. And there's a very easy way to do that using something here in the window menu. It's called the Environment Light Mixer. So find that and click it, okay? Usually I open up this little drop-down menu and select Normal and Advanced, and then watch how easy this is. All you have to do literally is to click all these buttons: create skylight, create atmospheric light, create sky atmosphere, create volumetric cloud, and create height fog. Okay. Now obviously there's a lot of settings here that you can use to customize your sky, but they're not so important right now. Okay, so we've got a nice looking sky to work with. All right. So the next thing that we need to do is we have to create what's called a landscape. And to create a landscape, we're going to change our mode here. Currently we are in selection mode, and that is what you'd get by default, but we're going to open that up and instead choose landscape. The larger the landscape, the more demanding it will be in terms of resources on your computer. So I'm going to reduce the size of this a little bit. Oh no, it defaults, excuse me. It's because I did this already. You'll see it defaulting like this, 63 by 63 quads. I'm going to make it just smaller, just because I don't want it to be too burdensome on our system. Those of you who know about Unreal Engine in a more advanced, or if you're at a more advanced level, you may know about the world partition system, and I will teach that, but that's going to be a separate video. Using that feature of Unreal Engine, you can make much, much larger worlds than this, okay? But this is going to be manageable for the purposes of this demonstration. Also, when you go into landscape mode, you want to make sure that this checkbox is set to true. I believe it is by default. Okay, enable edit layers is checked. The material will be empty, okay, like this. But I would like you to use just a temporary placeholder material from starter content. So we'll go to starter content, and in the materials folder, there's basalt right here. And if I select that, I can just pop it in, okay? And when I hit create, it'll give it the appearance of being made out of this material. So we'll hit create, and there we have it, okay? Now this shadow that you're seeing cast under my cursor is called your brush. And let me just default out some of the settings because I was sculpting a little while ago. So if I hold still, perhaps you can see that there's an inner circle and an outer circle. And that has to do with what's called the fall off. And this determines basically what's going to happen if I try to sculpt surface topology using this tool. For example, if I click and hold the mouse, you'll see I get a little hill. But it looks like it has a plateau on top rather than being rounded, because the brush fall off is the size that it is, the value, excuse me, that it is. But if I increase the fall off, you'll notice that I get something much more rounded in appearance. And if I were to have no fall off at all, it would be something weird like that. So in any case, I'm going to hit undo, undo, undo. And I'm going to set that back to its default. Oops. Every now and then, my office lights turn off because it's motion sensing lights and I have to wave my hands around like a lunatic. But in any case, I think that I like a higher fall off because I'm going to be sculpting some hills. And I want them to have like a rounded top. I'm also interested in the tool strength here. The default usually works for me, but I'll show you if you set the tool strength really, really high and you hold down on the mouse just very briefly, it's very, very difficult to control. So I'm going to undo that and set that back to the default. And now I can just sort of feather my mouse like that, okay? Or drag it, make changes in the topology of this landscape. This is also possible. You can do subtractive sculpting if you hold down Shift, make depressions in the landscape. So I'll undo that, and we'll undo any little residual sculpts that I've made so far. Okay. So I think I hit undo one too many times, so we're going to create this landscape again. Just make sure edit layers is enabled and a temporary material is there, and we'll create. So back to sculpting. I'm going to increase the camera speed to around 8 because we're dealing with a much larger area here than usual. And I want to start with the perimeter of the landscape by making sort of like mountainous hills, largest hills around the perimeter. And I'm going to adjust my brush size. You can see that that has an effect on how large of an influence your brush is going to have. So I'm thinking about roughly how big do I want my hills to be. And I like to start with the outsides first. And you'll see I want this to be almost like a big serving platter. Okay, I'm just going to sculpt out. And ultimately later, let's say if this is a game, and you'll see the reasons why I do this. If this is a game, what we can do later is we can put blocking volumes, invisible blocking volumes around the edges. And that way the player can never fall off the landscape and, fall for eternity into the void below this. Also, I don't want them to be able to see over the horizon because I will be placing what are known as background assets around this small-ish landscape to make it look more vast. You might have noticed that in the demonstration, we had a lot of really great-looking mountains all around us, and that is not what I'm sculpting right now, okay? I'm just sort of just using my imagination and making some hills. And I want them to be above the horizon, maybe spill out into the landscape a little bit. Like so. I can make hills in the landscape if I want. Another hill right there. Okay. And that's not too bad. Okay, that's a reasonable start. Okay, just going to check, make sure that there's no place that the player is going to be able to see over the horizon. Temporarily, let's leave landscape mode and go into selection mode once again. And what we're going to do is we're going to get a player start and drag it in somewhere where it looks like there's some reasonably level ground. Because I don't want this to, if I dropped it inside of something, I don't want this to spawn underground. If you see a message here that says bad shape, then you're going to have to find a different place to put it. So you want to make sure that you're not under something that you've sculpted. So I'll just hit end and snap that to the ground. And already we are in kind of an environment that we made. Okay? This is certainly not the finished product, but this is a start. Okay? Now, if I wanted to embellish a little bit on the, the surface topology of this sculpt, we can go back into landscape mode, and we can mess around with some of these erosion tools. And some of the time I like to start with noise. Noise is very useful for creating detail in things like hills or mountains. I like to set the tool strength, or excuse me, the noise scale. This is not the default. The noise scale default is 128. But for like little depressions and details, I like to set it to like a small value, like something like 5. And the tool strength you also want to watch out for. So let's zoom into a certain area and see what happens when I apply noise to that, okay? So you get these little ripples and irregularities. So let's undo that and maybe set the noise scale to 3. See if we like that more. No, that's maybe too much. So let's try 7. Undo, maybe 8. Want this to be controllable and not overdone. Okay, so, and also we can reduce the tool strength a little bit. So we'll hit undo a couple more times so that it doesn't make as big an impression every time I do that. Just trying to make sure that I can control it. Okay, that was overdone. Now we can smooth that out. We can use what's called the smooth tool right there. Okay, or I could have hit undo, either way. But I'm going to go back to that noise tool and maybe just plop a little noise on our mountains. I really should call them hills, because the mountains are going to be much larger than these. I feel like Bob Ross. That was overdone. Okay, a little bit of noise. That looks good. Right in there. Okay, maybe on this hill a little bit. This hill. Okay. Not too bad. Okay, let's see if that made any difference. Yeah, I don't hate that. So we're making progress already. All right. So let's get out of there, and now let's get into the real stuff. One of the things that I did in order to make this environment look much larger than it really is that I imported some assets that I own from my vault from the Epic launcher. Okay, so here we have the Epic launcher, and in your library tab you're going to have a vault with all the stuff you own. And I happen to have this thing called Distant Mountains, and what this pack consists of, and the way that I added it to the project, you just hit add to project, you find your project. In this case it's called MST, was this one. Then you click add to project, and it just takes a minute or so. But I already did that, so I'm not gonna add it again. But this is just gigantic static meshes of mountains that are meant to be seen off in the distance. That's why I have the sort of bowl shape or serving platter shape to the landscape that we've made, because I'm going to place these a little bit below that horizon so that no matter what vantage point the player is able to look, no matter how high they get up on a hill, for example, they're never going to be able to see over the horizon of the landscape. And these distant mountains will just appear to be a continuation of the world. So I added those to the project, so I'll minimize that. And I've got them already in, let's see, Distant Mountains right here. In this Meshes folder, you'll see that there are several of them. And what I did to save on performance is I converted these to nanite meshes. They don't come in as nanite meshes. So if you right-click one of them and you check, you'll see that if you were to have the same asset pack, and always check this when you're importing static mesh assets, nanite meshes are going to be a lot more performant. These were not nanite when I imported them, so I just highlighted all of them. I actually started by filtering for just static meshes, make sure that there's nothing else in this folder. And I did a select all. And when I right-click that, this was not enabled, it was disabled. So I clicked that box, and then there go my lights again. Turn on, turn on, turn on. Okay. In any case, I enabled Nanite, and it took a few minutes, and then I just had to resave them all. So that's good. Just be careful using Nanite on anything that has translucency. Okay, that usually or can often cause problems. So let me reset my filters. I've already done that. And you don't even have to use very many of these. You could use, as a matter of fact, I have no choice but to turn my camera speed way up and even multiply it by 2 because these assets are huge, okay? So you could even just use one of these. And in the scene that you saw as the demonstration, that's what I did. I used one asset. I don't remember which one. But when I drag one of these into the world, what you're going to see is that it's so big that we're practically going to be inside of it. We're probably going to spawn inside of it. So let me just see what looks interesting here. Let's take that. Okay. Now, I did drag that into the world, but you can't tell because we're inside of it. It's gigantic. So let me fly my way out. And you can see I'm way up in the atmosphere, practically losing track of where my landscape actually is. So let's go back into selection mode, and we're going to adjust the transform of this. Let's just kind of get an idea of where that landscape is. I'm going to pull that down, and I'm going to double click the landscape again and see if I can find that mountain. I don't see where I put it, but it's here someplace, so there it is. It's interesting that it's transparent right now. Landscape. Where's my mountain? You're around here somewhere. I have the feeling. Mountain. There you are. Okay, so the reason that it went transparent is because it's under the world origin, okay? So I can see where my landscape is now in relationship to this background asset, and I can move it closer, right? But it's huge. Move that over a little bit. And I could use others of these, and I have it just slightly below. It doesn't even have to be below the ground plane because remember, the player is never going to be able to see over that horizon. So if I go into play mode, for example, I've got to go back to my player start because evidently this must be overlapping a little bit. So let's go back to the mountain. I want to make sure that it's far enough away. And let's see, player start one more time. If it's still bad size. That's strange. Maybe these mountains are just a little bit too close still. That can happen. So let's get them farther away and see if that still happens. Okay, good. All right. So that's something that we can correct for. But even if I walk way up on one of these big hills that we sculpted, and by the way, you're seeing a little performance hit right now, and that's okay. We are going to eventually convert this landscape to Nanite, and that is going to get us some performance back. But no matter how high I can reach, I'm never going to be able to see over the edges of the landscape that we sculpted. Okay? So that's going to be very helpful in regard to those background mountains. And I could even make them bigger. And I can even make mountains behind the mountains if I wanted to, and they would seem to just go on forever. So let's zoom out. Get these positioned the way we want. And I'm not going to use other assets. I'm just going to Alt drag another copy of this to the other side. Make sure it's not overlapping our landscape. Make sure it's far enough away. And I can rotate it if I want. I'm all up in the clouds here, but I'll rotate it so it's facing this way. And I'll just use the same asset all around. So Option or Alt drag, depending if you're using Mac or PC. Give that some rotation. It's okay if they overlap each other a little bit. But this is what I'd like for the player to see if they look off in the distance. So let's use this one again on the other side. And I'll leave the rotation backwards for that one so it doesn't look too repetitive. They're going to see this side of it, or whatever side I want. Maybe I'll change my mind. Is this better? I wonder. Well, I guess we'll find out. Let's play. Okay. So if I wanted to, like I say, I could put those assets one behind the other and scale it up even larger so it just looks like the world goes on and on and on forever. But this is a nice little trick. Okay. So we have that, and I'm going to hit Escape. And why is this giving me bad size again for my player start? Did I fall through the world? I did not. Okay, so what's up with this? And also, let me reset my camera speed back to normal for a second. Player start. Let's see why. Okay, we're good. I think maybe, oops, I just hit delete by mistake. Undo. I think maybe what was going on is that I sculpted and the capsule might have been a little bit underground. So I lifted up and just hit end so that we're on the ground plane. There we go. No problems. Okay. This is obviously not the final look of everything, but this is already a pretty decent start. You know, this would impress a lot of folks. All right, so I'll hit Escape, and now we're going to talk about creating something called a layered landscape material. This material, this basalt on the landscape, is just temporary, but I want to have different layers that I can paint onto this sculpt so that it can look like, you know, dirt or soil or grass or rock or whatever. So I already made a layered landscape material for the demonstration earlier, and I'm going to show you what I had in it, this folder called My Landscape. If I open this up, it is a material that I made, and it is more complex perhaps than you're used to seeing. I don't want this to intimidate you, okay? So let me explain what's going on here. When you make a new material, what you're going to see by default is just this node here. It's called the result node, okay? And the result node, let me close that. The result node is not going to have anything connected to it when you make a brand new material. All of these are called texture samples. And some of them look like photographs, which they basically are. These are called albedo textures. And they basically define what a material looks like, if it's not going to be just like a simple color, for example, or some sort of special effect. The ones that look like this, these are called normal maps. And they're also a type of texture sample, but these help to control the way light interacts with their corresponding albedo maps. So technically, when I project this onto a mesh, it really is a flat plane. It has no geometry to it, unless I tessellate, and that's going to be in a different tutorial. I didn't use tessellation in this example, but it's a very fun thing to add. Anyway, so that when light interacts with these albedo maps, it sort of diffracts and reflects in the way that it would if indeed it had real geometry to it. These maps down here are called ORD maps, and they have 3 channels, just like all of the other texture samples do. Well, 4 if you include the alpha channel, but mainly it's RGB. But in these, and I'll tell you where these came from. These came from Quixel Megascans. And that is free for use if you are a legal Unreal Engine user. Okay, so you get all the Quixel Megascans assets for free if you use Unreal. Anyway, these are called ORD maps or packed maps because the RGB channels are not colors in this case. You have to think of them as ORD and not RGB. ORD, the O stands for ambient occlusion, which has to do with lighting of like little spaces and crevices and interstices that may exist on a shader that you're making. And the green channel is R, that stands for roughness, and the blue channel is D, displacement, and that has to do with that tessellation. You can tessellate, which means that if you apply the material to a mesh or a landscape, that it will give it actual geometry if you use that 3rd channel for tessellation. That has to be enabled outside of the engine, but once you do, if you're using 5.3, it's not available yet, I don't think, in 5.2, but if you enable it outside the engine, and I'll teach you how to do that some other time, you will see a displacement pin on the result node, which you don't see right now. So what I've done is I've just populated the roughness and the ambient occlusion from basically a blend of all of these ORD maps. And we'll go through this entire process. And the reason that there are so many nodes is because I've got a lot of layers happening here. There's a lot of layers in my layered landscape material. So this still exists, and I didn't want to delete it because I didn't want to have to import all the assets all over again. But we're going to make one just like that from scratch. And let's do a save all. That's why I said this basalt was just a placeholder. Okay. So let's make another landscape material right next to this one. And we'll right-click, choose material, and call it M underscore for material, my other landscape. I guess. You can call it whatever you want. I would say landscape underscore 02 or something like that. But this is just for fun. Okay, so if I open that, it's a lot less intimidating, right? Okay, so, one other thing I forgot to tell you is that about every 10 minutes or so, my computer screen, my monitor, goes dark, and I have to wait about 5 or 6 seconds for it to come back, so it's invisible to me. In any case, here is an empty material editor, which we can dock, okay? So we don't need project settings open anymore or anything like that, and we're good. So I'm going to move this over, and we're going to have to zoom out quite a bit. I also like to add a second content browser that I can dock right at the bottom of here so that I can get at the assets that I need. To do that, I'm going to go to Window, hover over Content Browser, and select Content Browser 2. Okay, and if this is not docked already for you, oops, I didn't mean to do that. If this is not docked, you just dock it wherever you want. I like it down here, and I usually just make room like this. Now, I've got a folder in my content directory. All right, let me just go like this for a second. I've got a folder called Megascans, and in here I've got some assets that I've already downloaded. One of them is this folder, Surfaces, and in here what we have are materials that I downloaded from Quixel Megascans. There's a rocky forest ground, layered rock, grassy cobblestone. That I was considering using that for roads, some snow, and a forest floor. So I was thinking of maybe using all of these, and just for the sake of time, I don't think I will. We don't need that many layers, to be honest with you. But you're going to get the fundamentals of how this works. But before I show you that, let me show you how I got these assets to begin with. It has to do with this tab right here, Bridge. This is called Quixel Bridge, and that may not be open by default for you. If it is not, go to the Window menu and just click Quixel Bridge. Now, like I said, if you use Unreal Engine, you get all of these assets for free, and they're about the best of the best you can get, especially for materials and texture samples and things of that nature. You may need to sign in. If you need to sign in, you do that right here, and I'm already signed in. You can see it's giving me the option to sign out. But if you need to sign in, you just sign in using your Epic credentials, the same credentials that you use when you go into your Epic launcher. Okay, we'll get you into this. So if I need a surface type, what I can do is I can click on surfaces, and there are many different categories here. Okay, for example, if I look at soil, I can decide, oh, clay, mud, mulch, sandy, and each one of these categories will populate with different samples that I can click on and preview, right? So I have already chosen some textures and downloaded them, okay? But I'll show you what will happen. You see, if I go into my Megascans Surfaces folder, there's a separate folder for each material that I've downloaded. But let's count. There are 5 of them here right now. So if I were to add one more, and I'm going to do that arbitrarily, let's add this one. A couple of things that you want to take note of is that you usually have a choice of quality settings. You don't always necessarily have to go with highest quality, but I'm going to anyway, just because it'll look great when I tessellate it later. But that's 8K, so you probably don't even have the ability to see 8K textures on your monitor if you're a regular person. Most people don't have 8K monitors, so you can consider using even medium quality. But I'm going to use highest quality anyway, just because. And if it's not something that I've already downloaded, I have to click this download button, and that'll take a moment. You can see the little progress spinning. And once it has downloaded, give it a second more. Then this add button will illuminate, and I can click that, and if I wait just a moment, it should pop me back into my main viewport. There we go. And I'm back where I was in my surfaces directory, and now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. Okay? So if I were to open one of these folders, this is what's called a material instance. And there's a small difference between this and what's called a master material, which we can get into some other time. But I'm in selection mode at the moment, and if I zoom out, I can select the landscape, and remember, we put the basalt material on it last time, but if I wanted to, I could take this material and use that instead, okay? And that looks a lot different. Now you see that repetition. That repetitiveness is called texture tiling, and that is a separate subject altogether. But a lot of that can be improved upon. And you can see that that's absolutely very, very flat. So tessellation, if I were to apply displacement or tessellation to this, would give this actual geometry, which is very, very cool. All right, but I just chose this material at random, and I'm not going to be using it anyway. So let's hit undo, go back to basalt for now. Go ahead. Apply. Okay, there we go. Just had a little glitch. All right, so we're going to make a material, though, that allows you to have many layers so that you can paint certain areas. Like I want to paint the tops of these hills as rock, but the very peaks of them are going to have some snow on top. And I'm going to paint the other area with like grass. And then when we add foliage on top of that, things like actual grass meshes and trees, it will look highly realistic. And the only reason that the mountains look weird right now is because, remember, I'm zoomed way out and we're not at ground level with the player. Okay? So we're going to be making our own material. We've already gotten a start on that. Remember in my landscape right here, my other landscape, I already have it tabbed. So here in content, here go my lights again. Wake up, wake up. Come on, make me look like an idiot. Okay, so in here we've got megascans and surfaces and all the textures that I've downloaded, all right? So I'm going to be using not the materials, but the textures that come with all of these, okay? So I'm going to start perhaps with this forest floor, okay? This is the 8K material. Wow, 8K. It's definitely overkill. But here is the albedo map. This is the normal map. And this is the ORD map that I was talking about before. So what I want to do is I want to highlight all three of them and drag them together into the material editor like that. Okay? And let me just make more room here because we're going to be needing some room. And I'm going to have to organize these as follows. Take the albedo and put it at the very top. Take the ORD map and put it at the very bottom. And leave lots of space between each of them. Okay? Lots of space. Okay. And we're going to think about how many different surfaces are we going to want to be painting. I think I want to paint this like rocky material, the rock material, the grass material, which is this forest floor, the snow, and I forgot what else I have. Oops, I went back one level too far. So we've got snow, layered rock, rocky forest ground. I'm not going to use weedy dry soil, but we want to leave space between these because if the next layer is going to be, let's say, layered rock, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take the albedo map and place it right under this one. Take the normal map, place it right under this one, and we're doing these in order, okay? In order of the number of layers that we're going to use, okay? And I'm going to back out one more time, maybe more than one more time. So we've got our first layer, which is our forest floor, our next layer, which is our rock layer, maybe I'll use, the snow. Definitely need some snow, so we'll go into there, put the albedo texture up here. Take the normal map, put it right here, and take the ORD map, put it right here. Okay? And maybe for today's purposes, this would be enough, okay? Because mine had more layers, but I don't think it's really necessary in this demonstration. Now we need to learn about a node which is called Landscape Layer Blend. And we're going to make that node to the right of our texture samples right here. And just look up Landscape Layer. And you'll find it eventually. Landscape Layer Blend. You know, I didn't type the whole thing, but you'll find it. Okay, Landscape Layer Blend. And we have to think about each paint layer, okay? And we're going to have 3 different layers. So what we need to do is we need to make layer elements or array elements for this right here by clicking this plus button. So I'll make 1, 2, 3, okay? And I need to mess around with what's underneath these little twirl downs, these disclosure triangles. So at index 0, See, each one has an index. That's 0, that's 1, and that's 2. That corresponds to these three little drop downs. So I'm going to twirl that open. I'm going to twirl that one open, and I'm going to twirl that one open. And I'm going to name each layer according to what the material is going to be. So layer 0 is going to be, I forgot what this is actually called, so let me remind myself, forest floor. So let's select this node again, and I'm going to call this forest floor, like that. And you can see it updates on the layer blend node, whatever I type here. Leave the blend type set to LB weight blend, and set the preview weight just to 0.5. And that is really not even that important, because it only is going to matter ultimately what this is going to look like when everything's all blended together on this preview mesh. But it's common practice to set those to 0.5. The next layer is going to, I'm just going to name it simply rock. And set the preview weight to 0.5. And this one is snow. I've been capitalizing. Let's do that again. Preview weight to 0.5. Okay. Now I need to make 3 of these, so I'll highlight this, and you can hit Control-C and Control-V, or you can also just use the duplicate hotkey, which is Control-D. So now I've got another one, and Control-D again, because I need one for the albedos, I need one for the normals, and I need yet another one for the ORD maps. Okay, so I'll just put them near the texture samples for each group. What you have to do next is to plug the RGB out of each texture sample in order into the corresponding pin on the landscape layer blend node for not only the albedo textures, but also the normal maps for them in order, in the same order, right? Like this normal map is the one that corresponds to this material, but this normal map corresponds to this, or I shouldn't call it a material, but texture. So we want to make sure that they all line up. So this is the next one. We pulled them in order for that reason, okay? And we're going to do the ORDs now. RGB out, RGB out, RGB out. Okay, so the next thing is to plug these into the appropriate pins on the result node. So the layer blend of the 3 main albedos, that is going to go into base color, and that's going to define the basic look. They're all superimposed right now. This is not what everything's going to look like in the end, but you'll see that we'll be able to paint all these different substances onto there later. But anyway, the blend of these goes into base color. The blend of all 3 normal maps is going to go into normal. Now, the blend of the ORD maps, we're going to have to get a little fancier because different information lives in the 3 channels, the RGB channels of ORD maps. Don't think of it as RGB. Think of it as ORD in this case. O stands for ambient occlusion, which is right here on the result node. OR, R stands for roughness, which will determine how shiny it is, okay, when light interacts with it. And the 3rd channel is D, which is displacement, and that's for that thing I mentioned earlier called tessellation. Now, if I had tessellation enabled for this project, and I can enable it later, okay, you would see a displacement pin near the bottom of the result node. It doesn't appear there now, but it can be enabled, but it has to be done outside of, you can't do it while Unreal is running. You have to do something outside first. In any case, I have to be able to access these channels separately. So what I have to do after this is not just connect it to one pin on the result node, but I have to pull off and type break, And what you want is break out float 3 components. This option right here, break out float 3 components. That will give me the blend of each channel. So think of this as ORD. If this is O, that's ambient occlusion. I'll plug that into the result node. R is roughness. And D, that third channel, displacement, I'm just not going to use right at the moment. I'll enable tessellation on another day when we talk about tessellation. But it's okay if you don't use that for the time being because it's not even available on the result node anyway. Okay? So now we've got a start. We also have to be able to control the tiling or the texture size of every one of these materials. And this is a little bit more work. So what we need out to the left here is something called a landscape coordinates. Oops, my light went off again. Let's see, must have spelled something wrong. Okay, so it's landscape layer chords right there, landscape layer chords, that node. And this has to do with something called the UVs, and that is the vertical and horizontal, basically, size of that texture tile. And I want to take this and multiply it by something. Okay, so I'm going to, you can either right-click and search for multiply, but the shortcut is hold down M and just left-click, you'll get a multiply node. That's going to go into A of the multiply, and then the B value, we're going to pull off of there, and we're going to type the word scalar, until we see this thing called scalar parameter, okay? And I have to give it a name, so I'm going to call it forest floor UVs, okay? And we'll start by setting that to a value, a default value of 1, and connect the output of the multiply pin into the UVs of that first texture sample. However, that also has to go into the corresponding normal map and ORD map for this first texture. So this multiply is going to go to the UVs of the first normal map as well. And of course, Unreal just crashed. Awesome. So let me pause the recording and I'll be right back. Okay, that was a bad crash and I had to start the whole material over. Anyway, so this should be approximately where we left off. So as I said, you have to plug the output of the multiply into the UV input, not just of the albedo map, but also the corresponding normal map, and also the corresponding ORD map. Make sure that you're doing this in the proper order, okay? We're going to need this for each layer, okay? So I need to make a separate scalar parameter for each one, but I can copy and paste at least these two nodes, Control C, Control V down here, and hold down S and left click if you want to use the shortcut to get a scalar. I'm going to name this rock UVs, like that. Boom. And remember to start with a value of 1. If you multiply anything by 0, you get nothing as an output. Okay, so that's going to go into those UVs, and it's going to go into the normal maps UVs, and it's going to go into the ORD map UVs, again in the correct order. Let's paste that again. Okay, pull out, get a scalar parameter any way you want, and I'm going to call this snow. Yeah, snow UVs. Default value of 1. And plug that in to the texture sample, the normal map, and the ORD map. Office lights. Everything's crashing down around me. Okay. So, okay, now we've got that all plugged in, and I think we should be able to hit apply, which is sort of like compile for a material, and save. All right. Now we're going to replace this temporary basalt material that we've got on our landscape with the one that we just made, my other landscape. So I'll select the landscape, scroll down to where I can see the landscape material, and I'm going to replace it with the one that we just made, okay? And it's going to look very wonky for now, okay? That's okay. That's to be expected. Don't worry if that happens to you. Next, we're going to go into landscape mode once again, and this base layer right here, remember when we enabled the edit layers, it will start with this one. And I like this to only contain the what's called the height map information. And it might have some paint still in it. So I'm going to right click and clear. Okay, if it said paint in here, I would clear the paint out of it, but there's no paint in there. So I'm going to lock that layer, right click and create a new layer, right click that and rename it paint. Okay. All right, next, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Paint tab. We can still see our edit layers there. And we have to create what are called layer info assets for each layer that we're going to use, which is very, very easy. All you have to do is click the little plus sign, and you'll see that pop up that says Create Layer Info. Use this first option, Weight Blended Layer Normal. And it will automatically make a folder for you and automatically name the layer asset file for you. So that's good. And we will start to see things coming to life here as we do that. Okay, so do it for as many layers as you have. Okay, and I'm going to start saving a little bit more often now that we've had that crash. So let's say that I want my base layer, okay, to be this made out of this rock, okay? So what I could do is I could right click and I could just choose fill layer, okay? Now we're seeing a lot of texture tiling for sure, okay? So let's go out of landscape mode for just a second and I'll show you how to deal with this. Let's verify once again that my player start is not underground. It's not giving me a warning, but it's useful to look at this from the player's point of view and see how that tiling is and what it's going to look like off in the distance as well. So that's why we have to make those scalars for the UVs. So let's go back to that material that we made. My landscape, my other landscape, this is the material. And I'm just going to leave this window not docked. Let me just try to size it down a little bit for you so you can see what happens when I make certain adjustments. So let's go to this rock layer, okay, which is what I just filled that entire surface with. Now, the rock UVs basically tells it per quad how many times to tile that texture sample. So if this is a larger number, you will see this texture become smaller because it is tiling more often per unit area. So if I set this to 2 and hit enter and then hit apply, you'll see it becomes smaller. If I set it to 3 and hit apply, it'll get smaller still. But I don't necessarily want it smaller. Let's try 0.25. Hit apply. And now we're getting somewhere. All right, so let's go 0.125. Hit apply. And that's not so bad, okay? So up close, maybe not the greatest thing in the world, but this is mostly going to be for like the tops of the hills. And I'm looking sort of out in the distance to see what that's going to look like. That might be too repetitive. And this phenomenon is just called texture tiling. And there are fancy ways to break that up, which I will teach you in another lesson. But I think I'm going to set to an even lower number. Let's say 0.01. Apply. Oh yeah, okay, that's way better. That's way better for our rocky mountains off in the distance. And that's all pixelated up close right now because we've scaled it so much. But don't worry, because the lowlands are not going to be made out of this anyway. Okay? So anyway, let's leave this docked in case we have to adjust the UVs of other materials. So I'm going to zoom out now. And by the way, you can see I'm getting a very lousy frame rate right now. So another thing that we can do is select the landscape, and we can make the landscape nanite if we want. So scroll down with the landscape selected, enable nanite, and click Build Data. And this will give us a performance boost. Okay, so I'm not getting as poor of a frame rate now. Okay, so that looks not bad. I'm going to go back into landscape mode in the paint tab. And now let's get a different material, the forest floor. And I've got a brush again. This brush has a size, a fall off, you know, everything that it had before, and a tool strength. If I set this all the way up and I paint, it's going to be full strength, okay, in that spot that I painted on. So let me undo that. If I set it to a lower value, like its default, and let's say I just click briefly, you barely see anything. I'd have to click, or click and hold, or click and drag, you know. So let me undo those moves as well. So I want to be able to control this. Let's just make sure that my brush size is a little bit smaller, and that my tool strength is not too strong. And I'm going to test this in a couple of areas. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint all the lowlands with this. And I'm going to increase my tool strength, I think. I am going to do this crudely at first. All right, that'll happen every once in a while. Don't worry about that. By the way, I should point something out. There is something else that I haven't told you. You might be getting weird, like angular shadows on this right now. And if you are, and you may or may not be, but if you are, here's the fix for that. Go to Settings, Project Settings, and type Shadow Maps. Okay, and this is going to be defaulted to Virtual Shadow Maps. So just change it to Shadow Maps, and that will solve our problem if you're experiencing that. I forgot to tell you that I already did that. So let's get these hills. And if I have to paint some rock back on top of that, it's going to be just fine. Okay. Pretty crude, I know. Now I want to go back into Play and check out the UVs. Okay, so the UVs, I think that this texture is going to need to be a smaller UV value. Okay, so let's go to that, and we're going to go to Forest Floor UVs, and I'll set that to 0.25. And you do have to hit Apply before it will take effect. Okay, so that'll spread it out. Okay, and let's go into Play again from the perspective of the player. That's not too bad. And even though it's perfectly flat, remember, when I add tessellation later, that's all going to jump out as actual geometry, which is a great thing. You barely notice it, though, once this is covered with things like foliage. As I look around, you can see there's a kind of a hard transition between the rocky surfaces and where I painted in this forest floor material. And we can smooth that out. So let's zoom out once more. And again, everything is conspiring against me. My monitor just went black again, so I'm waiting 5 seconds for it to come back, and here it is. Okay. All right, so going back into landscape mode, I'm going to use the Smooth tool. And I can go into these areas and smooth out the transitions. And again, you can adjust the brush size and the tool strength. You have to experiment with this until you kind of get a feel for what is most comfortable for your own fingertips. Here go the lights. This is quite an adventure for me. Come on, lights, turn on. Okay, so we'll smooth out those transitions. That looks a little bit weird to me right there. I think I might need to paint some rock back in. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, so let's go back to the this material, smooth. Trying to get between the it's sort of like within the fall off range that I'm using. You'll get a feel for this the more you practice it. I'm not necessarily going to spend as many hours agonizing over this as I might otherwise, but I do want it to look okay. Okay, so I'm just sort of feathering that out. That looks pretty good. Smoothing. By the way, you can only do this kind of smoothing if you do all of your paint in the same edit layer. So keep that in mind. Don't try to make separate edit layers. I want more grass over here, excuse me. Don't try to make separate edit layers for paint, okay? So let's go back to smooth. Smooth that out a little bit more. Smooth it. Okay, right there. That looks like something that I don't want. So I'll paint some more rock in there. Okay, that looks good. That looks like a good blend. All right, and let's keep rock selected, and I'll go back to the paint tool, and I'm going to look at the tops of these little hills that that we made, and we'll kind of make them rocky in appearance. And in that way, they'll blend in a little bit better with our higher mountains. And that can spill into the landscape a little bit if you want. And don't forget, we can always smooth that as well. Maybe that should look somewhat connected. Okay. I thought I might have made one other hill. Well, sort of. A little bit over there. That might have been too sloppy. Let's see this from the other side. It looks like I missed a little bit over here. Okay, so that's starting to look pretty okay. And don't forget, we've got some snow, so I can paint some snow, maybe on the very tippy tops of some of these peaks. Not too much. Hope you can see it. We might need to mess with the UVs of the snow, because I can see some tiling significantly there. So let's do that. We're going to go to our snow and change the scalar again to maybe 0.125. That's an estimate. Hit apply and have a look. I think even we can do better than that. 0.01. Apply. Yeah, that looks cool. I like that. So wherever you think some snow belongs, you can just plop that down. Oops, I right-clicked by mistake. Just trying to rotate my viewport a little bit as I do this. And why not? Should there be some snow like in the landscape maybe? Probably, you know, so let's just turn the tool strength way down so that it's not like overwhelming. But I'll just plop some little bits of snow here and there. That will also help to break up the appearance of the texture tiling on the other material. So this is kind of wintry. Okay, that looks pretty cool. All right, let's go back into selection mode. I'll save all. Don't want to lose what we've got. Hit play. All right, this is starting to look much nicer, much more like an actual landscape. Could do some better smoothing there, but I think that's also partially due to the UVs that I made for the snow. Maybe it's just a little bit too much. So let's go back to that. And we're going to go let's say 0.5. No, I tried 0.125, so 0.75. Oops, 0.75. Can I do that? Yeah, okay. Apply. Let's look. Okay, yeah, that took care of that problem. Okay, and those background mountains look pretty awesome. This looks a little overexposed to me right now. So also, let's change where the sun is. Let's give this some mood. So I'll hit Control L and we'll steer the sun. Maybe we'll have a nice sunset over here somewhere. And if I want to change the size of the sun disk, all you have to do is you have to select your directional light, and you're looking for this source angle. I know it's counterintuitive, but that's going to increase the size of your sun disk, okay? And maybe that's a little bit too much, so I'll turn that down a little bit and hit Control L again. See where exactly that is going to look the coolest. I like to have it occluded by the sun a little bit. That's always fun. Okay. So did I ruin my snow UVs? Let me see what that looks like off in the distance. Yeah, I messed up the snow UVs. So let me do that again. It matters to me more what they look like far away. So what was the value we liked for that? 0.125 worked, I think. You're not going to notice, yeah, that's better. You're not going to notice those little splotchy areas because I'm going to be putting foliage down on top of this anyway in the form of grass. But anyway, like I said, this is overexposed in my opinion, and one way to deal with that is to use what's called a post-process volume. So I'm not in landscape mode right now. Let me hit Save All, just in case. I'm in selection mode, and I'm going to search for post-process. Just type post, and you'll get one. Drag it into your world anywhere. Doesn't really matter where. And then with that selected, in your details panel, search for infinite. And you want to find infinite extent unbound, because otherwise it would only apply to within that wireframe. So we want this to apply to our entire world. Okay, so we'll check that. And now I can scroll down. There's a couple of things I like to do for best appearance. This bloom, check the method box and set it from standard to convolution. And then the exposure, click metering mode and exposure compensation, and change this from auto exposure histogram to manual. And then just turn this up until you get the exposure you want. That's looking pretty cool. And if I play, it's possible that my character, this is why I lit the character, okay, because I didn't want her to look too dark in the environment. But you can see that the lights are definitely affecting what's around her, and I think that it's way too much on her brightness. So let's go into the character and change the intensity of those lights, maybe to 500. I'll go to 300 on that one. I'll go to 300 on that one. And they both have attenuation radii, and they're affecting too much of the world. So let's bring that one down so it's really only going to affect the character. And the same for this one. So I don't really want it to illuminate the area around her, just the character. Okay, so let's see if that did the trick. And that's, I think, a little too bright still. Okay, so the types of lights that I'm using, by the way, are called rect lights. You can see rect lights. And they're like soft boxes if you're into traditional photography. And you can set the width and the height and the barn door angle and all that stuff. So let's just make that, I meant to make it taller. Transform that down a little bit and reduce this to maybe 150. And with this one, we'll do the same thing. Source height. Translate it down a little bit. Maybe change the barn door angle so that it's more focused on her. Okay, so they work just like softboxes. They're great. One of my favorite types of lights to use. Okay. Look at how this is already. This is frickin' awesome. Okay, look at that sunset, the mountains off in the distance, and our well-lit character. This is freaking beautiful. Okay. So the next step is things like grass and trees. So I'm going to save all. And now I want to show you what I had already imported into this level. There's this folder called Black Alder. And this is a great free tree pack that you can get from the Epic Launcher. So if you go to your marketplace, it's in my vault because I already own it. But you technically also already own it because it's made by Quixel Megascans, and it is therefore free. So I would suggest, if you don't already have it, search for Black Alder and don't find it at all. Okay, trust me, it's there. That's because I typed Black Alder, Megascans Trees European Black Alder. So when you click purchase, it's going to cost you $0. Okay, but you still have to add it to your cart and check out before it'll be in your library. So I found that in my library, Black Alder. Megascans Trees, they're right here, and I clicked Add to Project. I found the project, which is this one, and you can see this is grayed out because I already did it, okay? So I'm not going to add it this time, but that's what I did, and that's how I have that folder. Also, in my Megascans folder, I downloaded some foliage called Tundra Grass. And I think that this already had Nanite enabled, if I'm not sure. Yeah, if it doesn't, what I would do is I would filter this for static meshes and just make sure you enable Nanite on all of it. Okay, so let's start with the foliage. And you're going to go into this folder here. Let me see, 3D plants, Tundra Grass, foliage. Okay, make sure I don't have any filters. Okay, and you can pick and choose the different ones that you want, but I'm going to use them all. So what we'll do is we'll go back into landscape, not landscape mode, I beg your pardon, foliage mode. It says drop foliage here. So I'm going to take, I think, all of these, Control A, and drop them in there, just like that. Okay. So you can see there are 0 instances of this foliage right now in the level. So I have to select which ones I want to paint in. So I'm going to just click on the first one, Control A, and do a select all so that they're all highlighted. And then I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key and click the checkbox for each one of them, for each foliage type. All right. what we have to do at this point is we have to experiment with the density, okay? So if this is very, very dense, you might not get, well, let's set this to 1,000. I'll show you what I mean. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. And I just clicked right there, okay? I just dropped down 6.85 thousand instances, okay, of all those little bits of grass. Now that's a lot, okay? So does it need to be that many? Well, I guess you have to decide, but if you did it this dense, it's going to be at a performance cost. And also, it might prevent you from really properly seeing the material underneath anyway. So it's kind of a compromise. So I'm going to undo that and find a sweet spot. Okay, so let's do maybe 200 and see what that looks like. See, that might not be dense enough, so we'll undo that. So let's set that maybe to 400. Plant some grass. Okay. And that looks fine, okay? But I'm going to make it even better. Now that I've got my density, what I'll do is I want to make sure this is going to default. This scale X is going to default as 1 and 1. But I want to be able to vary the height, or vary the height randomly of each instance. So I'd like to set a range here, something like 0.5 for the minimum to maybe 1.25 as the maximum, and it will randomly scale. Align to normal, I will explain that once we add the trees. Okay, but basically, I would turn that off for trees, but not for grass, and you'll see why once we get into the trees. I like to leave random yaw checked, because that means that the rotation of each one of them is going to be random as well. And we can set these to movable. That's going to give them better lighting, believe it or not. And I already preset the cull distance, okay? So you've got a minimum and maximum value for this. Foliage culling is important to preserve performance. It's one way of optimizing the performance of your game. So the minimum cull distance is how many units from your character will the foliage always be visible, okay? So let's just estimate, and I'll set this to 1,500. Okay, 1,500 units. So if she's within 1,500 units away, or anything that, any foliage that's 1,500 units away from the character will still be visible. The maximum is the distance away from the character outside of which foliage will not be drawn. So let's set that to something like, I don't know, I'm going to estimate 2,500. Okay, and that's gonna help our performance a lot. Okay, and let me just see if there's anything else I need to worry about here. Okay, no. Okay, so now what I can do is I can just paint this grass wherever I feel it's appropriate. So I'm going to zoom out. And I think that the grass is appropriate mostly in the non-rocky areas. We're not going to see it very well. Let me just reduce the brush size a little bit. We're not going to see it very well as we paint it. And by the way, dragging this is, remember, it's making many, many thousands of instances of this. Also notice that the filters, I leave foliage off so that it can't paint on top of itself if it's already there. So basically I'm just clicking, and it's planting all that grass wherever we think it belongs. It's possible that I have missed some spots, but we'll discover that as we roam around. And by the way, in case it wasn't clear, the way that I obtained this grass assets was through Quixel Bridge. I neglected to mention that. You just go to 3D plants and you look for whatever you want. I'll go into the grass category. I chose wild, and this was the asset that I downloaded and imported. If you have the option to export Nanite, then choose that option. That way you won't have to add, you won't have to convert them yourself. So this one was already available, export Nanite. So they're already Nanite foliage, which is great for performance. Okay, and the culling will help as well. All right, so there's gazillions of these in the level, but you're not going to see them all at once because they're being culled. So let's save. Let's go back into selection mode and play. That's some pretty tall grass. I probably shouldn't have set the maximum to what I did. And it's very dense. It's probably denser than it ought to be. I don't like the way that this is casting light on the grass, though. So I could go back and adjust her rect lights a little bit more, I think. And also, let's go back into foliage mode. And I wonder if I can adjust... If I select all of these, if I can change this to, let's say, 0.85, if that will change it after the fact. I don't know is the answer. Looks like probably not. I should have looked at that more closely before I was planting it, frankly. Okay, so anyway, let's see if I can alter the culling to get some more performance back. So we'll say, let's do 800 and 1000. Save. See if this gives us some performance back. Okay, yeah, and that error message just disappeared. Okay, it looks like I missed a spot here, but we're getting better frames per second. And the only reason that I'm not getting really good performance right now is because my screen recorder is going at the same time. So I'm going to go into my scalability settings right here and change my view distance to something like far. Let's see. Yeah, maybe far. And I can lower my anti-aliasing to epic. And foliage to epic. Not everything necessarily has to be cinematic all the time. And remember, I used 8K textures on frickin' everything here. So it's a miracle that this is even running. Okay, so now we've got a nice, pretty smooth frame rate again. And I can, of course, go back into these areas. Now, those popping in, okay, that's because I was too aggressive on my culling settings. So let's go back into that foliage mode. Select all of these again. Go 1500, enter, and let's go 1600 maybe. Okay, save. Mostly we went overboard on the density. So you're going to see a little bit of that popping in as we move throughout our level. Okay, like I said, also, that wouldn't be so bad if I didn't have, again, my screen recorder happening at the same time. So I'm just going to reduce some settings here. So that I can increase my culling. Save. Yeah, I did reduce the quality a little bit, but you're probably not going to notice. Did we gain some performance? Oh yeah. So now we've got a nice smooth frame rate, and the popping in of the grass is less apparent. Okay, I can increase the values further, but for now I'm not going to. All right, let's plant some trees. Okay, we are in the home stretch here. So still in foliage mode. Okay, we're going to scroll up, and I'm going to uncheck all of these. Option uncheck. Okay, we've already planted the grass. Now I'm going to go back to not Megascans, but Black Alder. Okay, and that's that tree pack that you downloaded into here. I believe they are already nanite, so go into foliage. And for now, we're going to use the ones that are inside of this Pivot Painter folder. Okay, and we have to decide what trees we want. We don't necessarily have to use everything, but let's just select the ones we like. I'm using Control to be more picky about. I don't want these little shrubs and stuff. So now that I've got those, I can drag and drop the foliage into this area. So we'll do that again. And we'll be able to tell them apart because the ones that say 0 are the ones that haven't been planted yet. So let's select all of those and option click so that we can paint some trees in here. Now painting trees, you got to be careful really with the density, because what's going to happen is that if I try to plant some trees, let me reduce my brush size here. If your density is, especially here, let's say the default, if I were to click, I'm going to get like an impossibly large amount of trees there. Okay, they're all like, they're being culled out right now, but you can see that's absurd. Okay, that's absurd. So let's undo that. Okay, undo. And I'm going to set this to something really low. 0.0125. Let's see. And some trees. And they're probably being culled out. So let's see. Gotta get closer. That might be too low. So 0.05. Okay, so they're being culled out. We do it right here. Okay. Now that we have a better vantage point, let me undo those. I want to get a sense of how far apart they are. And you can also specify how close they can be to one another here. So let's go back to 0.125. And right here from this vantage point, we should be able to see how close the trees are. Okay, that's probably appropriate, okay? But they're being culled out. So for now, because I lowered those other settings, I'm going to change my culling on the trees. So let's go to 3,000 and 4,000. Okay. That still seems a little dense to me. So let's undo those. Okay, so going back to my density, 0.05. overculled. I want to be able to see this better. So I'm going to set this back to 0 just while I'm planting them, so I can zoom out as far as I need to. Okay? And every time I click the mouse, I'm planting trees. So let's zoom out and decide where we want trees. So we'll put some trees there, put some trees there, there, anywhere we want. Okay, and there's something I forgot. So I'm going to remove those instances. So let's go back into select mode for a second. This will be easier. I'm going to delete those. Okay, so go back into foliage mode. I forgot to tell you something. For the trees, let me make sure that I didn't delete the grass by mistake. Did I? Oh crap. We might have to redo the grass. Sorry. I accidentally deleted that because that was included with all my instanced foliage. But in any case, what I forgot to tell you about trees, let me put the trees back in there, is that I'm going to select them all. I want to do the same thing with scaling that I did before, but I want to turn off align to normal, if you remember that parameter that I mentioned. Okay, so I don't know how it, if I already mentioned this, forgive me, I saw that it was off. I don't do that for grass, but if align to normal is on, what's going to happen is that if I plant trees, they're going to grow sort of like perpendicular to the you know, the plane that they're on, and you'll see trees growing sideways if I planted them there. Trees generally just grow up. So when I'm planting trees, I just say align to normal, and I turn it off so that the trees are always pointing upwards. So let's quickly get the trees back in there, and we'll make some grass after that, and then we'll have a look. So we'll put trees. And the next time when I paint in the grass, I won't use the same density that I used because that was frankly overkill. Okay. That looks fine. And we can always change the culling after the fact. So still in foliage mode. Let's go back and deactivate these. Go back. Looks like my foliage needs to be saved for some reason, so I'll save that. Let's just do a save all. And let me fix the grass real quick. So we're going to go back into Content, Megascans, 3D Plants, Tundra Grass, Foliage. And here's all that foliage. So I think I used all of it for one thing. We're going to drag that in there. And this time align to normal. I'm going to turn that on. And the scaling, I think the grass was too tall. So last time I think it got too tall. So I think I'm going to do this, let's say 0.25 minimum to 0.75 maximum. And if my memory serves, I think we had the density set to something like 400, but I'm going to set it to 200 instead. And that should be a lot easier to deal with. Let's look at the culling, which I'll probably want to set after the fact. Placement, instance settings, cull distance. Yeah, if they're both zeros, that means that it's not culling at all. Okay, so those are all highlighted, but now I need to option click the check boxes, right? So it's going to paint those in. And I'm going to try to get that grass throughout the lowlands. Wait a second. Wait a second. No, 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 no. That's trees. I somehow had the wrong thing selected. Okay, so undo. I lost some trees. Losing concentration. Let's get some trees back where they were. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so it's now we don't need more trees. So let's disable those. And that wasn't supposed to happen. So we're going to select all of the grass now. Make sure that our density is reasonable, 200. And make sure that all of the grass is enabled. Option click the checkbox. And now I should be able to plant grass. Wherever grass should be. I think grass should be where there's trees. Around the hills. And again, it's by going in and play testing it that we find out if we've missed any spots that are important. Okay. So I'm not doing any culling, but I did reduce our quality settings. So, oh, my monitor just went blank again, so I've got to wait 5 seconds and then it'll come back. Okay, so I'm even with no culling now, I'm getting pretty reasonable performance. But did you notice that it's kind of dark down here? Right? Very dark down here. Now that we've added all these trees, they're occluding the sun. So I could change, I suppose, let me get out of the foliage mode, go back into selection mode. I could change the where the sun is in the sky, but I could also make it so that it is not as dark down here in general. And we do that with the skylight. So select your skylight, and I'm just going to increase the intensity of the skylight. So intensity scale, let's set that to 2. See if that made a difference. Set it to 3. That should be changing. 10. Okay. Oh, and it looks like I've got to save all this foliage as well. So I had to, that might be too much, so we'll see. And obviously I must have missed some spots for the grass over here. So here we've got some grass. Okay. And there we've got that sunset. And I think the skylight is indeed too overdone. So let's go maybe to 6 on the intensity, 4, maybe 5. You can see the light adjusting as we do that. Still getting good performance. I'm doing no foliage culling at all, by the way. And my screen recorder is still going. We've got that beautiful sunset. And if I just finish placing my grass everywhere it's supposed to be, we would have something somewhat completed. Works better even still if there's audio. What you could do is go into your content folder and look in starter content. And I've got this cue that I made for this wave file, Starter Birds. I just turned it into a sound cue. So we go outside. And already, it seems more real. All right, so I think that turned out rather okay, and hopefully you have a sense for how these types of outdoor scenes are created. Thanks very much, and we will return to this at some point to talk about tessellation and special techniques to break up texture tiling. That's more advanced territory. But all things considered, I think that this is a pretty beautiful scene that we've made in, just about an hour and 45 minutes. So thank you for being here and sticking through this. I know this was a long one, but I hope you try this and have fun doing it. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.